A word from our sponsors. What do the world's largest demand-side platforms have in common? They're effective, but they require large annual contracts and spend minimums. With AdLib, growing agencies get a single platform that connects to every top global DSP with no contracts, no spend minimums, and G2's #1 ranked support. That means access to the entire universe of TV, digital out-of-home, audio, display, video, and native without a hassle and with no blind spots. It's incredibly easy to use. Plus, it can automate most of the work your team spends hours a day doing manually. Get the most powerful media buying technology without the barriers to entry. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com. Again, that's GETADLIB.com. Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTech God. On today's episode, we are joined by Jason White, Chief Product Officer at Arena Group. In our last episode on the Google Antitrust case, I spoke with Adam Heimlich, who provided a high-level overview of the case and its impact on ad tech. Today, I'll be discussing the publisher's perspective with Jason, diving into what the case could mean for monetization strategies, the variety of options available, and how publishers should prepare for the potential changes ahead. With experience at News Corp, OpenX, Viacom CBS, LiveRamp, and more, Jason brings a wealth of knowledge on the case and its implications for the digital publishing industry, both from a historical standpoint and looking forward. Jason, welcome to the AdTech God Pod.
Thanks, AdTech God. Great to be with you.
Yeah, great to have you here too. So, in the last episode, I talked to Adam. He gave us a really good overview of what the antitrust case means, why it's happening, and what could happen to ad tech in terms of creating new potential companies and startups and solutions. But how could the antitrust case shake up publishers and how they make money from ads?
Yeah, a great one with Adam. So from our perspective, in my experience in the past, it's kind of an exciting moment, frankly, because from our perspective, for far too long, there's been, I don't want to say, shackles or handcuffs or anything like that, but, publishers have been challenged from a lot of rules and kind of imposed regulations, at least from Google on the ads side. And I think from our perspective, we look at a future and see more opportunity. There may be a little bit of pain in the beginning, there always is, but these things also take time to roll out, right? A lot of us get caught up in the fact that, this is something that's, freight train coming down the tracks and, it's going to hit immediately. And, everybody tends to kind of buy off on those panaceas when they read, articles and the such. And I never subscribe to those, right? It's a steady hand at the till. These things don't happen overnight. It's an evolution, not a revolution. Whatever trite phrase you want to use, like that's the facts, right? We saw it with cookies play out. The can continually gets kicked down. And I saw this firsthand at LiveRamp, right? Where we're constantly having to reset expectations just because of that fact. And then, you look at this case, you look at folks like Kawaja Luma that puts out there probably will be 5 to 7 years if this shakes out before we see any changes. And if that's the case, like from our perspective, we see a lot of runway there.
So with everything that's happening with the antitrust and, the potential outcome could be a breaking up of Google, whatever that means, whatever business they decide needs to be broken off. What do you think that will do in terms of how publishers monetize? Do you think that has a direct impact, or do you think it just removes some of that power that they have? But how do you think that a potential breakup of Google could impact publishers' monetization?
Yeah, so there's a couple of anecdotes that I kind of pull from, right? And this is the only thing that you can do when you're thinking about the future. It's very hard to predict the future. Nobody can, is the dirty little secret. People make 5-year plans, all that stuff. They're garbage, right? You can't tell what's going to happen next year or 2 years from now. And there's a lot of evidence of that when you look kind of like back in the past. But from my past, there have been times like before universal pricing rules, let's just kind of jump in the pool there, right? Header bidding was a thing, and just high level, few bullet points here. My backgrounder, I was the company that invented header bidding. that was MySpace and Vox. Definitively. Client side, header bidding, RTB, different from the RTB protocol that we use today, server side, et cetera, but still RTB nonetheless. You had behavioral ad networks turn into DSPs overnight, right? And we saw all of that happen. And we were like the McDonald's of ad serving at the time. We had like 50 billion impressions a month. And we had to have our own ad server because DoubleClick couldn't handle the volume back then. And it was freshly acquired. Back then it was, '08, and it had been freshly acquired by Google. But we effectively had our own GAM/AdX at that time. And so, kind of cut to CBS, we, took that concept of header bidding, innovated that with index, and modern day header bidding as it exists today, it was kind of the output or genesis of that, right? And as soon as that kind of came to be, went to folks, the powers that be over at Google, individuals that are running AdX in the publisher business. And I expressed, I was like, hey, this is coming down the line. And they effectively wanted to kill it, at that time because they didn't know what to do with it. If you looked at where Google was at the time, they had the ad server and they had the ad exchange. And they put all sorts of, you couldn't work with other exchanges inside a GAM. AdX had to be your primary, ad exchange. And, basically said this is coming down. They said, we'll kill it. And as soon as we came out with it, we started doing floors on AdX and multiple, demand areas inside the ad server, total control. And, AdX went down from like, 70, 80% of our revenue down to 30%. And our yields were, extremely high. We had doubled our CPMs effectively because we knew that we would, because we were bringing in every single exchange to compete on every single impression. Right. And then, the rules kind of came in place afterwards. And then, yields kind of came down because that's where the shackles are kind of introduced. So I kind of use that as an anecdote to say, I think we're going to be okay. Like, at the end of the day, they're just going to be broken out as a separate exchange. They're too big to ultimately be acquired. So Google's still going to have, skin in that game. And there will probably be commercial agreements where, the DoubleClick network's still going to be a part of it. There's still going to be some type of data, behavioral data, they'll be connected to that to, keep up performance. So, yeah, I think all, boats rise effectively.
Do you think it'll play a role in, so obviously CBS is a large publisher, huge volume, but the smaller like long tail publishers, because there's millions of those that currently really don't have an option. Like their only option really is Google today. Like where do you go to monetize, standard display inventory or video inventory on your website? You plug into Google and you let it run. Do you think it'll play a role in the opportunity for those types of publishers, maybe long tail, mid tail publishers to monetize with different partners?
I think that you'll see companies emerge that will solve that problem for them. And I think you already see some of those companies out there, right? Like Raptive and Mediavine. Those only become more important because they're going to be able to aggregate data at scale. Just like, if you take a step back to see what Google has truly done over the past couple of decades, it's been powered by scale and data, right? And innovative tech up underneath it. So, that can be replicated, assuming Google does not have, a lot of those, commercial relationships and, kind of tethered to, a lot of that core Google data, which again, I think will continue. But assuming that it doesn't, that scale transfers to other players and they will do that on behalf of, those, longer torso, longer tail publisher.
So you mentioned data. Do you see the loosening of the shackles or even just the criteria or the methodology for data collection and like potentially data sharing, right? Which today kind of lives in their own black box. They don't share that data with the advertisers. They don't share it with the publishers. It's in their own world. How do you see that affecting publishers? You think it's going to be better for them in terms of monetizing and personalizing ads? How do you see, I guess, the openness of data sharing changing things?
Yeah, it comes down to, things that will continue to be done in clean rooms and the such today. So that could only make things more interesting. Does DV360, ultimately want to make a data milkshake with Magnite? Maybe that breaks that down and they're able to do that. And again, conventional wisdom is like, oh, that'll fall on more, better demanded publishers is a term that I've been reading earlier today, which I think is another way of saying like the ComScore 150, like the top publishers. But again, I think that a lot of that will translate to those torso tails because I think that there'll be, third parties that are going to be providing technology as they do today, but just in a more meaningful way. And data is a part of that story as well.
You think it'll open up, transparency and trust? Like we talk about that a lot, right? Like transparency and trust in the industry and fairness in overall, right? Like today, it feels like no matter what you do, maybe CTV is a little different because I would say like Trade Desk kind of dominates the CTV demand at this point. But in the web and mobile app world, it's definitely Google. And I'm wondering with the breakup of Google, whatever that means, and the openness and sharing of data the right way, do you think it'll create more transparency and fairness in the market? Do you think that there's going to be, multiple companies that rise up and kind of fill that void or find an opportunity to grow and do a better job?
Yeah, I do. And I think that, necessity is the mother of all invention. And, from our experience, and I'll call on another, anecdote, and we're applying this at the Arena Group, which are, LLMs and, machine learning, back data science to come up with smarter recommendations, right? So, the thing that we're investing in right now is, how do you take a page and a half page view per visit on average? Some pages are different. Some are like 2 or 3, others are 1. Really time spent, right? Like how do we double that? I think that in a lot of ways we get hung up on, these tectonic shifts in the ad tech marketplace and, what's that going to do to my yields and this and that. I've yet to see yields significantly go down over the past 20 years, right? Like I just don't see that happening. And again, I think that there's going to be a runway on this thing if it comes unwound, that there will be enough time for people to step up, innovate, like I said, necessity being the mother of all invention. But then publishers have to invest in data science. Like we have to know more about our audiences than the buyers. And that hasn't been the equation heretofore. Why? Because, we're playing a game all about eyeballs and slap an ad on it. And, when you don't have to innovate, which publishers haven't had to do over the past decade or so, since Google's kind of dominance where they could lean on that, you kind of get fat and happy, right? And the reality is when the cookie started going away, when I was at LiveRamp, I talked to we got 8,000, domains within the first couple of years on it. And a lot of that was communicating to them what that upside could look like. Like we developed a calculator. We said, look, there's a 5 to 10x value increase when an advertiser actually knows that it's a female, knows that it's a male, right? And our vision was, very much that, you need to have like a CRM expert and data science experts, just like the marketer does. So you have to think more like a marketer. So let's get away from the, shakeup of monetization and what that's going to do, because that same thing was threatened with a cookie. And frankly, at the Arena Group, we haven't seen it. Our yields are up 35 to 40% year on year. Why? Because we're investing more in data and optimizations, user path optimization. This person comes in, should they be taking down a subscription path? Should they be taken down? Are they one and done? Like, should we just throw a bunch of ads at them, and make as much money as we can? I hate saying that, but when you're smarter about your audiences, like you can do stuff.
You know how to monetize.
You know how to monetize. Should I take them down an e-commerce path, right? As e-commerce is growing more for us, like we're investing heavily in that and leveraging synergies within our company. So, I think it's not an either or. And there is going to be a 1 + 1 = 4 or 5 with folks that know how to intelligently invest in their audiences and in their insights.
So you mentioned, right now it's all about eyeballs, view page. We're going to serve you as many ads as we can, obviously as relevant as we can. Do you think this might actually create somewhat of a revolution in the way publishers build their sites, the types of ad placements they have, because you're able to really draw the value from that user data that maybe before wasn't available to you? and now you're able to collect it, analyze it, and serve better ads and a better experience?
Yeah, in my opinion, it is. And I mean, you're talking to somebody that's a bit biased because I came from a marketer background. I've gone kind of back and forth. Like I've been a CMO, TrueCar, and I've been on the Bank of America Countrywide Home Loan side. Really kind of started at lowering my bills, and like we were very direct response driven. Like we built a machine, human powered, with analytic support, where we knew, the exact value of a creative. We knew if we put a 50 state creative there that we got a 50% lift in click through rate, which translated to the bottom line because we were in a shared lead model like Lending Tree. So any efficiency that you got along the way, whether that be click through rate or conversion rate, with any multivariate test that you're running, move the needle. And then we moved into kind of the machine learning era, right? So like when I was at Fox, we built these models where we understood the data. Like Omnicom came to us and was like very interested in like J.K. Rowling fans, right? And we could do that and surface that because people at MySpace were telling us that. And we call them hyper targets. Like, all of these things we could, organize in a schema and, surface those in meaningful ways and provide a nice GUI front end where agencies could target these, hyper targets of things that people, were saying about themselves. So we built it 6 months. And, we came back and, the response was, wow, the segments are really, really small. We're like, what we said that was going to be the case. But what we learned was the density of it, like from a latent semantic space. You put all of that density. I like this. I share this. I post this. I'm friends with this person, the social graph. When we put a pixel on, so we had a self-service ad platform like Facebook ads, and hundreds of thousands of advertisers were on it, a lot of small, medium businesses. There's a bunk bed advertiser in Denver. They may sold 5,000 bunk beds on a monthly basis. We put a pixel on their page. Dude, we blew up almost their business. But like we sold 20,000 bunk beds in the span of 3 days, and they're like, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. But it just goes to show that the machine learning works, right? When you build those sciences, the predictiveness of all of these layers of data that we have across the web, and you can aggregate these, especially publishers. Like people come to tens of millions of people come to our sites, and they like this, they read this type of article. And so if you can organize that in a similar fashion, you can create predictive capabilities that can change the user pathing, can change the ad optimization, all sorts of things. So I think that mostly publishers have to, it is an evolution. It will be a revolution, but it's not going to happen overnight. And if they make the smart investments, like we're doing at Arena Group, and start acting like marketers, there's a lot of upside.
Do you think it's going to change? Because, right now, a lot of the tools that we use are built into Google. Do you think it's going to spawn also just like multiple startups as it relates to tools and solutions in market that publishers can use if that data is made available?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that the competition will be good, for publishers, because to your point earlier, I think you said the black box. Black boxes are never good, right? We saw that in header bidding, swipe pre-bid is kind of, the de facto, and that's just true in most everything, right? Like ad networks were like that. And that's what kind of ushered in programmatic. So yeah, I do think that that's going to foster competition, more creativity, more innovation. And that's always a good thing. I mean, publishers may have to shoulder the burden, by bringing on another resource or two to manage, additional partnerships. But at the end of the day, if, the costs are lower or the revenue is higher as a result of that, then it kind of pays for itself.
What do you think publishers today should really be paying attention to as it comes to the case? You mentioned we won't see changes for years, which is fine, maybe not immediately overnight. But what do you think they should be paying attention to, and what do you think will be important things to just learn during this case?
I think it's important that they learn how they made the machine, right? The things that have carried the day from a yield optimization perspective and the things that haven't. Like, and you're seeing that play out, like the universal pricing rules, like we talked about. I think, Steph Laser had some good feedback on that in the case. I think, folks, rightfully or wrongfully, are trying to articulate first look and last look. And the reality is this, right? There was an era right when this first came out, like when you're the ad server and you're the exchange, first look means that you go first, right? And in an era where buyers are buying needles in the haystack and looking for needles in the haystack, that matters. It's kind of like, what was that Daniel Day-Lewis movie? There Will Be Blood, right? Where he, at the end, that scene just, God, it sticks in my mind, like probably in most people's, where he does that milkshake, right? Here's mine, here's yours. And, he sucks it down and drinks the milkshake. And I took all of your oil, kind of a deal. It's not too, dissimilar, ultimately from that. And that's first look, and then last look, Google kind of had to do that once we got header bidding out into the market. They kind of looked at that and went, oh, okay, well, actually, this could work out for us because we can see all the bids that come through and then we can be the arbiter and kind of use that to floor ourselves. But then, like we got hip to that. We started flooring them, And so universal pricing rules, kind of come out of that. So I think it's important for publishers to follow all of that, breadcrumbs. And, we're going to go back to a world, honestly, where it's not going to be first look. It's not going to be last look. Again, this is where you invest in data science and yield optimization and all that stuff. And if you're doing that and moving the levers in a smart way, i.e. the yield optimization, again, I can only go back from what I experienced in the past. Those were good times, before universal pricing rules came in and we got a little more shackled. So yeah, I think it's following those breadcrumbs, learning from the good, learning from the bad, and incorporating that into your overall optimization strategy. That's what we're doing at the Arena Group as we see this.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, reading the articles, Ari Papar is obviously extremely smart, and he's been writing about them daily in his Monopoly report, reading all the news and publications that are out. Like we're literally watching how the sausage was made. Like we're learning like so much. There are things that I'm very familiar with, having worked in the industry long enough to know. I know that there's some good to all this. I mentioned on the last episode that I don't know what it's like without Google. Like it just is Google. You have a mobile app, go to Google first and then see who else is in market and mediate it. And call it a day. I mean, that's really how you operate. It's not rocket science because there are no solutions in market to replace them today. You have to work with them.
Well, and it evolved to where it is for a reason, right? Like they were able to buy DoubleClick. And then they were able to create the exchange. And all of these things created value. I mean, they created value. There's no question. Like, when you look at CPMs versus the blind ad network marketplaces that we were in, and I played a part in that world. I can tell you, it was murky. I don't want to call it underbelly. It was gray, charcoalish. But it was the best thing that we had at the time, I mean, especially at scale. And, ad.com really, pioneered that game. But, we evolved to where we evolved to. And Google rightfully so took advantage of it. I mean, there were other people that could have, dominated that. We had the ads, as I said earlier, the ad server and the exchange. We merged that into Magnite. I think Barish posted something the other day that articulated that, as he always keenly does, where it's like they had the keys there. Now, maybe some of the stuff I know is mothballed. Maybe they dust it off as a really good ad server. And maybe they bring that off of the shelf. But that's my point. Like all of that stuff is going to come to bear again, and it's going to create choice. And I've never seen, in my experience, I've never seen a time where when you have great choice, that sucks, right? Like that's
right.
kind of counterintuitive.
Right.
The choice is a good thing.
Choice is a good thing. And I think I agree with you. I think the reason why Google is where they're at today is because they were good.
And by the way, they have other good stuff too. I mean, and a lot of that stuff is good in the Google stack. I mean, there's some nuances to the black box and how they've, behaved themselves at the first look and the last look and universal pricing rules and the such. There's bad, like we talked about. But then there's innovations like BigQuery, the Google Cloud. I mean, shoot, all digital media publishers are thankful to Google search and SERP for creating their businesses. And we've built a big time discipline in that. I mean, shoot, we moved away from the SI business because it wasn't a financially sound business and we're a public company. We put that out there, but we doubled down our investment in Athlon, and we basically turned Athlon into Sports Illustrated Why? Because we know search, and we know what good user experiences are because we, operate ourselves from a place of, premium publishing. And premium publishing doesn't play the short game, right? Like we play the long game. We write about the things that are trends, but, strong POVs because we have a premium, kind of magazine background, right? Like that's in the DNA. But we also know how to write things that people like. And as a result, Google likes, especially with the new core updates, right? So there's a lot of good stuff, from Google. And I think that those things will continue in their own separate, buckets, but there will be more competition in ads. And again, as I recollect from and call on anecdotally from my experience before in certain chapters, of that evolution of the Google stack, it can be good.
I agree. Well, Jason, that actually brings us to the end of this episode. That was incredible. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I loved your perspective on all of this.
Well, thanks for reaching out and the opportunity to talk about ad tech. I'd always appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ad Tech God Pod, a podcast for the people about the people that make ad tech great. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of ad tech. Don't miss out on our latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of ad tech innovation.